Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. O my God, I trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed. Let not mine enemies triumph over me. Yea, let none that wait on thee be ashamed. Let them be ashamed which transgress without cause. Show me thy ways, O Lord. Teach me thy paths. Lead me in thy truth and teach me, for thou art the God of my salvation. On thee do I wait all the day. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed here on Truth Frequency Radio. I'm honored to have as all of your attention and joining me for this discourse and fellowship. I'm honored to have as guest with me this evening, Pastor Nate Wolfe. Pastor Nate, are you there, brother?
Hey, Zen, I am here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a great pleasure, man. Thanks for being on with us. And it's been a little while, and I always appreciate doing shows with you. I have great respect for you and your journey, and
Thank you.
I do want to give you a chance to share your website and contact information, and also to let people know about the release of your book, and
Yeah.
we can talk about that, and also take on the world, because you've been doing a lot of speaking engagements, and
Yes.
also you are co-host with Robbie Davidson on his show Celebrate Truth. So if you
Yeah.
would let people know about that as well.
Sure. Yeah, Zen, it's been too long. I know it's coming up on like 11. Well, it's coming up on 12 months since I was fired from the church for attending the Take on the World 18 conference. And Robbie and I have been on the radio since January, since the beginning of January. So it just seems like this last 6 or 9 months has just flown by so speedily. But it is good to be with you again. And so I appreciate that. I'll share a few of my links, but my website is firedfortruth.org. That's fired, F-O-R, truth.org. I've got some links to some videos, my YouTube channel. There also is a button for Patreon support if someone would like to support my ministry monthly. At the top of my website is a Patreon button. You just click on that and you can sign up to participate in that and partner with me in ministry. But my Patreon direct link is www.patreon.com/Nate Wolfe. And I do have a snail mail option. If people want to send something to me, you could email me at nate@firedfortruth.org, nate@firedfortruth.org. And, if you have questions, if you want to send something, I can give you the mailing address for that. But those are the easiest ways to find me. Other than Facebook, I'm on Facebook at Nate Wolfe and then Fired for Truth in parentheses. That helps to distinguish me between the other thousands of Nate and Nathan Wolfes out there on Facebook. But it's really great to connect, with viewers, listeners, supporters, and I always try to return every message as I'm able to. So thank you for letting me share those links. And then, as many are aware, I am co-hosting with Robbie Davidson each week on revolution.radio. That's Studio A, and that is every Saturday evening from 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern. And we pretty much have guests about every week. In fact, we need to have you on. You really blessed us by helping get us together, before this transition to Robbie taking over that time slot. And it was great to be with you and others for a few weeks. And so we thank you so much for helping us get off the ground and helping us connect. And, when I was filling in there, I wasn't expecting Robbie to then say, hey, how would you like to be my full-time co-host? So
Right.
that was quite a surprise and quite an honor. I was just happy to, to be on with you guys. And we had a couple of good panels there with Rob Skiba and others. And so that was good stuff coming into the new year.
Yeah, that was a really amazing time, and it was awesome opportunity for all of us to gather together and to do shows and the roundtable discussions. I really had a good time, and yeah, I was very blessed to be able to have the connections to get you guys set up for that show,
Yes.
and just because I had no idea either that Robbie was going to invite you to be co-host with him, and I just invited you to do the roundtables with us
Yeah,
because
I know.
of your situation and your story. I thought it was interesting and that people should know about it. And so, yeah, it just really blossomed and took off. And I know you guys have been doing a lot of good work.
Thank you.
And yeah, and so
It's hard to believe that I think we're on like show 36 or something. I've lost count, but
yeah, it is amazing. It goes by so fast. Uh, the beginning of the new year to now, and
yes.
wow, yeah, and to be able to have a platform to be able to speak to others and do shows and interviews and also to share all of your own personal efforts with regard to you and Robbie, because both of you guys are busy and you've now released your first book, your testimony, and talking
Yeah.
about and so, for people that don't know your story, can you talk a little bit about that, and as well as your book, and
Sure.
maybe share kind of the chapters and what you
Yeah,
talk about and what you lead them through?
definitely. So I'll give just a brief overview for those who haven't heard my story. Many are aware of what happened to me last year, but in about this, it was early spring. I can't remember the exact date, Zen, but it was like late March, early April of 2017. I had been studying for a lesson that I was going to give for a church north of me up in Michigan. I'm in Toledo, Ohio, and I was going to go up about 40 minutes north into Michigan and do a one-time lesson on the flood. And they had a summer series, and I thought it was just, the luck of the draw, as we would say. But looking back on it, I believe it was the providence of the Most High that I was selected for this topic. And so they emailed me and said, your topic will be the flood. And I was delighted because I thought, wow, that's an interesting topic. And I could have gotten other topics that weren't so fun and exciting,
Hmm.
but I studied for this topic, and I was several weeks ahead of schedule. So I decided, I'm going to go on YouTube and see if there's any good videos, presentations about the flood. And so I did that, and I watched a few, and they were pretty good, And all of a sudden, I noticed in the sidebar there for the recommendations, there was this interesting thumbnail for this video called "The Global Lie" by Celebrate Truth. And it's interesting, Zen, because the past few months before that time, I had really been thinking a lot about the deception and the lies that were in the world through
Right.
Satan. And so I had actually done some lessons about truth and deception and the influence and power of Satan, and how even folks in the church, had been duped by Satan. And so when I saw this thumbnail, The Global Lie, I thought, wow, if there's a global lie, I need to know about it, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
I've been preaching truth for over 25 years at that point, and I thought, okay, well, it looked like it was over an hour long. So I was like, okay, well, if it's truth, it's worth it. So I started watching it, and it caught me off guard, caught me by surprise. And right away, Robbie was giving scripture, and his guests, Rob Skiba and others were in that documentary, and they were giving scripture after scripture after scripture regarding creation and talking about, modern science, scientism, and all these things. And I got to the end and I thought, wow, this is really weird. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? Because I saw the scriptures, what they were showing on the screen were true. But I was thinking, what do I do with this? So after I finished that video, Zen, I'm now starting to see in the sidebar recommendations that have the phrase flat earth in them.
Right.
So I'm like, flat earth, what's that? I hadn't really made the connection exactly yet. And so I thought, well, I got time. So I started diving down this flat earth topic, and I was just kind of blown away. And I thought, man, I'm going to have to, study this, because if there's even a small chance that this could be true, like, it's worth investigation. So that's what started me down the flat earth rabbit hole. Although I do have to say that in 2015, 2016, as many flat earthers have done, I dabbled in some other conspiracy theories, 9/11, the Kennedy assassination, the moon landing, whether it was true or whether it was a hoax. And before that, I had always been interested in Bigfoot, Loch Ness monster,
Yeah, absolutely.
chupacabra, all those kinds of things, right? So I could see, looking back, that that interest served me well in coming to this topic. But I studied that out mainly from the scriptures. I did watch some videos that were purely more of a scientific nature, empirical evidence, but I was really drawn in to those videos that presented scripture. And then I went back into my Bible after taking all of these notes, and I was just amazed at what I saw. And Genesis 1 really smacked me between the eyes, because I looked at Genesis 1 and I thought, man, what it says is not what modern atheistic science is telling us. And how did I miss this? How did I miss the fact that the sun and the moon and the stars were created on day 4, and
Right.
that dry land appeared, the earth was created on day 3, or at least the
Hmm.
land. And
Yeah,
so,
elevated above the
it
water.
blew
Yeah.
me away. Yeah, it blew me away. And it wasn't very long after my wife kind of joined that discussion, and she came to the understanding of the true biblical creation probably even faster than I did. So where that left us then, in spring of 2017, we continued to study, we watched videos. I heard about the Flat Earth International Conference in 2017 in Raleigh, but we just didn't have the time or the money or the vacation to do it. So it's funny, I had actually purchased streaming access, and I was having problems with streaming. So I just never got to watch it. I had to watch the videos later. But in 2018, in the midsummer, my wife messaged me. So this is about a year, a little more than a year later. My wife messaged me and she says, "Hey, there's this conference in Ohio, this Truth Conference, and it's only, an hour and 10 minutes from us." So she says, "We got to check this out." And it was the Take on the World 18 conference in Vermilion, Ohio. And I didn't know anything about the conference, but I had seen Chris and Liz Bailey, the organizers. I had seen them on their biblical health show on Now You See TV. So I had a good impression of them, their character. And we said, let's go to this thing. So we made arrangements and we went out there in August of 2018. Went to the conference. We were blown away. And my wife and I were sitting in the car Sunday night at the end of the conference. We were almost literally pulling out of there to drive home. And my wife says to me, she says, what do we do with this information? And I said, I don't know. We both had a strong feeling that there was something that we need to do. We needed to get off the couch and stop being consumers of information. And so we said, well, let's just pray about it. And so we prayed about it fervently, and we decided we'd take about 40 days just to pray, and not take any action, just to see if the Father had some type of leading. So my plans then, and you know how our plans go sometimes, right?
Right.
My plan, so this was August 22nd through the 24th, 2018. So we prayed that prayer on the 24th of August. And my plan was, hey, we've got a church leadership meeting coming up in early October. I'm just going to pray for a few weeks and maybe broach the subject of Genesis 1 in this meeting. And I wasn't going to mention flat earth or anything. I was just going to say, hey, would you be willing to take a look at some items here regarding creation? And I didn't get that far because this was September 14th on a Friday morning. I got a text message that I was meeting with all the elders at the church building in an hour. And, the rest is history. But basically, I went in and they fired me on the spot for simply attending this conference, not having actually taught anything, not having posted anything on social media, sharing about flat Earth. And so it was quite a shock. And, that became the impetus eventually for the book. Was the book is a sharing of my truth journey, of course, leading up to Take on the World, coming into flat Earth and other subjects. And then it highlights what we experienced at the conference and the importance of that prayer. And then, of course, my firing and everything that's happened in ministry, what I like to call my renewed ministry since that time. However, the book actually starts at the very beginning of my life because I wanted to give people not just okay, Nate became a truther and he got fired and now he's doing ministry in flat Earth. I wanted to people to get a sense for me as a person since I was born. What were my influences? Where did I live? How did I come into spiritual truth in Christ, way before flat Earth? How did I get into ministry? So the book really covers all of those items and hopefully gives folks a real clear picture of who Nate Wolfe is as a person, not just as this guy that got fired, and showed up everywhere on social media. So,
Well, that's great, man, because I think, that's necessary, and um, that you should be able to share the details of your life and your journey, how you even became a pastor, and that led you, to this journey of truth and the work that you're doing now. Because you and we spoke even before we did shows together,
yes,
and we talked about, and I told you that I felt like the Most High was opening doors for you to lead you into this work, and that at some point, this, this work and doing the radio shows and now writing books, that it's going to replace, as far as the endeavors and also as far as creating income for yourself, that those kind of avenues will open up for you, and that
yeah,
God will lead you to bring forth your message in larger capacity. And certainly that has been the truth, and that you are very well known now by a lot of people. And even though this kind of thing, I'm sure, has happened to others,
yes,
but yet you have been bold to stand for truth. And even with the reading from Psalms 25 today, in standing for truth, a lot of people don't make that commitment. And even when they are cornered or they are forced in the manner that you were to, because they wanted you to go away quietly,
oh yeah,
to just fall back into the shadows and
yeah,
just and so for you to be bold in your stance and also to be outspoken. And now, because it's not just about flat earth, there's so many conspiracies and revelations and
mm,
so much truth and discernment coming forward now, and you have a voice to sound the trumpet. And
yes,
truly um, that's something that not a lot of people are truly doing or prioritizing or having dedicated their life to. And as a pastor, I believe that, the Ezekiel 33 watchman parable, that we have great responsibility. I mean,
yes,
I'm not a pastor myself, but, in standing for truth and having committed myself to serving the Most High God, and you being a pastor and having already dedicated your life in that manner, I mean, there's no better way than to do radio and to share um, with a listening audience the things that you are learning, the things that you are discovering, and also incorporating in your walk your journey to awakening. And so you're a leader, you're a guide for so many that will, even though they may not know it now, but they will one day look to you for answer. And
Yeah.
that's huge, brother.
Yeah, it's been a very humbling experience and a powerful experience seeing what the Father has done because like you said, Zen, the elders when they called me into this meeting, the meeting lasted less than 10 minutes to my recollection. It was very quick and there was barely any discussion whatsoever other than they started the conversation and they said, we are firing you, and they put this piece of paper before me, that said you're fired effective immediately. Their reasoning was for having an association. They didn't describe that association, but they said we can't have a minister with that kind of association, and it was their desire. And of course, there was no contractual language in this letter. It was just they were outlining, here's what we're doing. And then here's what we want you to do or not do. And so they wanted me to keep it as a private matter. But my point in sharing the truth, and you notice, many people have witnessed, I never once used the name of the congregation, address, phone numbers. I never even used the first names of any of the elders who fired me, because it wasn't a vindictive thing. I wasn't seeking revenge, even though I was hurt and I felt that I was mistreated, biblically, spiritually, emotionally. I really wanted to share the facts about my firing because I felt like this is a potential problem for a lot of congregations in America, because many congregations have that American church leadership model, which is more like a business board of directors,
Right,
men who are in charge rather than, hey, I'm a shepherd. I'm
right,
held to a higher expectation. My example needs to be very biblical. And so I think they were and they were used to having this power and control, right? Because after all, in their eyes, I was simply a hireling, right?
hmm
They hired me, so therefore they could fire me at will. And I think they underestimated, when they said, here's our expectations. Uh, they underestimated the fact that I would share. They thought, as you said, I would just kind of go quietly.
right,
And, that was intelligent on their part because, to be honest with you, they knew most ministers that get fired, what do, Zen? They quietly slink off and
right,
they look for another congregation to work with because they still want to do ministry. They still love the Lord and the people. And let's face it, they have to have support for their family, right? They have to
right,
pay bills and put food on the table.
hmm
And so most ministers are fearful. They're not going to buck the system. They're not going to go public because the moment you go public, you have lost any type of good recommendation
Oh yeah, no doubt.
from the church that you worked with for 7, 8 years in my case. But it had just gotten to the point, Zen, where I was like, you know what? I feel so strongly about this truth. And because it's related to deception, I was like, I can't just quietly slink away. I can't in
Right,
good conscience, just go work for another church and pretend that nothing happened.
exactly.
And so, I just really tried to, follow the Father's leading, and I never understood how much of a ministry I really would be given.
Right.
So, you're right. I mean, I don't have anywhere near a full-time income. you know, that's been
It's
challenging,
coming. All that will
but
come.
all I've tried to do is, seek first His
Yes,
kingdom, and
yes,
His righteousness.
right.
And we don't have everything paid for all the time, but we have the major things. He always seems to come through for us, where our house is paid, and our cars are paid. And but there's with a family of six, obviously, and I lost a $63,000 a year income because I had been in ministry over 25 years. I had a couple years prior to my firing. I had completed my Master of Ministry, and so I got some increase for that, commensurate with additional experience and training. But working for the Father is a way better deal. Let me say that.
Absolutely. Absolutely, brother. I fully agree with you. And we'll cover this more when we come back from break. But, I completely honor you. And I know that the Most High and all of the angels are applauding your service and your choice to do what you have done, and that the rewards are in heaven,
Amen.
um, and but you will be blessed and taken care of here as well. I truly believe that. All right,
Amen.
we'll be right back, everyone. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. All right, brother, I want to turn it back over to you and give you a chance to share just a little bit more as far as let's go into what you did at the Take on the World conference and the
Yes.
things that you spoke about. Because I believe that you gave was it three speeches on different
Yeah.
topics and issues?
Yeah. I mean, man, that was a dream come true, Zen. I mean, it would have been a dream come true just to speak in any capacity, to speak a year later at the conference that got you fired.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that
Exactly.
has to
Yeah.
be that has to be the Father orchestrating that. I could never
Absolutely.
I could never do that. And that would have been a blessing just to share, the testimony that I've shared tonight, so far on the radio show. But I was really blessed to have three different teaching spots on each of the three stages. And so, Saturday morning, I really decided I was on the what's called the Cosmos stage, which typically the Cosmos stage, mostly has flat Earth, biblical cosmology related speakers. But I decided to not so much go with, hey, here's Nate's, top 10 biblical cosmology scriptures. But I thought, after a year of being a public figure and suffering this, loss and this, tragedy, at least what I thought was a tragedy originally, in my ministry, I said, I need to do something to, um, you know, encourage people, encourage truthers,
Uh-huh.
especially those who believe and stand up for the true biblical model. And so I did a lesson that was called Finding Your Way on the Flat Earth. And I started out, I said, what this finding your way on the flat earth presentation is not, it's not, how do we travel on a, plane that's motionless and, all that. I said, it's really more of a, philosophical and, spiritual journey
Uh-huh.
of how do we cope, with loss? How do we cope with persecution? And, I laid it out and I said, if you stand up for these truths in some way, shape, or form, we're all going to have persecution. And
Yeah.
I said, it may cost you some of your family members, or some people have lost pretty much all of their immediate family. Some have lost various friendships. Others have either been attacked, on the job, threatened that they'll lose their job, or as you've pointed out, and Robbie Davidson and others can corroborate that I'm not the only minister that's been fired for flat Earth. In fact, there's been some ministers that were fired when they were actively teaching it. But my situation is unique in some ways because of the fact that it was such a strong reaction for me simply going to a conference, not having taught it, and then just the way that I was handled. But finding your way on flat Earth was just a way to try to encourage people. And we looked at, people in the scriptures. I said, look, we're in good company. I mean, here's Moses. He has to go to Pharaoh, who was seen as a god on earth.
Right.
He was the son of Ra. I mean, he
Right.
was God in the flesh. In their mindset. And so he has to go to him and say, hey, my God says, let my people go.
Right.
And you've got Jeremiah, who was literally thrown in the pit, a physical
Yes.
pit, not once
Right.
but twice. And yet the Father promised him, they will fight against you, but they will not prevail. They will
Right.
not kill you. And so, I spent some time even sharing about Jesus and how, in the Gospels, it records that even his own family members viewed him as a lunatic, someone who was crazy. So
Right.
I spent that first presentation Saturday morning really just trying to encourage people and to say, look, you're not alone. You're in good company. There's a precedence here for the Father to be with you as you're sharing these truths. Doesn't mean we're not going to have loss. Many of us have suffered great loss, but there's also blessings, as you said before the break. And so that was the first presentation. And then I did a beach chat, which was very exciting. Basically a smaller venue outside on the patio. You've got about 20 seats there. And it's just a much more
Right.
intimate, relaxed Q&A, kind of an atmosphere. That was pretty cool. And then Saturday night on the main stage, right after Robbie Davidson, did his Scientism Exposed presentation, I was able to share my testimony of truth and my firing and about the renewed ministry that the Father has given me, and basically all the high points of what that has entailed. And so that was a powerful moment. And at one point, I almost kind of broke down because they literally were standing up and cheering and
Awesome.
praising the Father. And man, I just about lost it. The outpouring of support, and it really just hit me that you're standing on the stage in a seemingly impossible turn of events. But that was a powerful moment, most of all, Zen, not just for those who supported me this year by prayer and resources and encouragement, but my entire family, my wife and my 4 kids, which are 2 young adults and 2 teenagers, 2 high schoolers. They were all present for most of the weekend, but especially they were all present in the room, and they got to witness, their husband, their dad, after all of these challenges and setbacks and difficult days. They got to see me present that testimony. They got to witness the people, all of those people supporting us and praising the Father, and that was a really special moment.
Yeah.
um, I'm grateful to Chris and Liz that they allowed me to do that. and
Uh-huh.
uh, and then I don't know if you heard, news travels fast on the flat Earth, but my third presentation uh, on the faith stage was Sunday morning, and I gave a presentation that was in relation to coming to whole Bible belief, or journey to the Father's truth, as I've also shared it as a title. But as you're aware, most likely, for about 10 months, my wife and I had been praying about and studying things relating to Torah, relating to the Sabbath, relating to the feast days, and a host of other, related subjects. And the reason why we started into that study months and months ago was because Take on the World, the atmosphere there, many, probably the vast majority of folks there are what you would consider, or people would label Torah observant.
Yes.
And I just never been around folks like that. I mean, I
Uh-huh.
was very sheltered. I'll be honest with you. I was very sheltered in my, conservative, Protestant background. And And so there was something about the vast majority of those folks, their spirit, the joy that they had, that was just intriguing. And so we started, studying these topics. And for months and months, I wrestled with so many things relating to these topics. And I had an experience, if it's appropriate to share,
Oh, please,
uh,
yes.
about 2 months ago. My wife and I were really pretty much becoming more and more convinced about the Sabbath, as a set apart holy day,
Yes,
since the
uh-huh.
creation, and continuing for believers today. But we hadn't pulled the trigger on that. We hadn't implemented it, in our home. We had started to talk to our kids about some of these things we were studying, and we didn't want to overwhelm them because, Zen, they got the rug pulled out from under them in a big way when I got fired.
Right.
And they've been through a lot of changes and grief and loss. And we didn't want to damage them with yet another major shift. But we felt that it was, we couldn't deny what we understood to be true. And so we had a series of discussions with my kids. We called it family dinners. So Wednesday night, we would try our best to get all the chicks in the nest. Wednesday night, we'd have dinner together, and then we'd have some tabletop, discussions about Sabbath and different things. And
Very
around
good.
around the same time, about 2 months ago, I heard about a men's retreat that was happening at a Messianic congregation in Indiana. And something about that event was very intriguing. And I got that, I hate to say feeling, but I got that leading again that just like Take on the World, hey, this is going to be something important. I need to be here for this. So I talked to my wife. She was very supportive. And she says, hey, why don't you invite your buddy Daryl? Dr. Lee. I don't know if you know Dr. Lee. He has a
Yes.
YouTube channel, but he lives in Toledo, about 20 minutes from me. And we became fast friends months ago. And so DR says, yeah, man, let's go. Let's do this. And I think he was kind of wondering, why is this non-Torah observant guy inviting me to Messiah's New Life Tabernacle for a men's retreat? Like, he couldn't figure that out. Like, this is weird. But he was intrigued. So he went. And, that evening that we went to the retreat, we traveled. It was the first Sabbath that I had purposed in my heart to fully participate in. And, you know,
Awesome.
full disclosure, I knew what it meant. I knew why it was commanded, how it was a blessing. And I thought, I want to do this with my brother Daryl. So get this. I had a series of strong spiritual attacks that occurred during that first Shabbat that I had practiced and had been dialed into. And so we arrived, it was Friday night, just before sundown. We arrived at the Roadway Inn in this small town in Indiana. And I felt great. I had lots of energy. I couldn't wait for the next day. I really didn't know what to expect because before the men's retreat would start Saturday evening, they were going to do a Shabbat service during the day. And that was open to, women, children, all of that stuff as well. But I thought, I want to see what this is like. And so I went to bed and I woke up in the middle of the night. And then I felt really strange. I felt a heavy presence. I also felt like some sickness type of symptoms, like my face was flushed. I was sweating. I felt like almost instantly I had the flu or something, right? And I
Uh-huh.
thought, this is weird. Like, I'm fine. Then I wake up out of a dead sleep and I feel this way. And something wasn't right. So I looked at the clock, and wouldn't you know, it was exactly 3 a.m. on this digital clock. And I'm not superstitious, but I do understand about the supernatural
Yes.
and some potentials. And so I thought to myself right away, I said, whoa, wait a second. I'm not getting sick. This is a spiritual attack.
Yes.
And so I was, kind of discombobulated because I was tired, but I just started praying. And I prayed for about 15, 20 minutes. And things started to lighten a little bit. I felt a little better. The heaviness started to dissipate. And I was really just focused on prayer. And thankfully so, because if things hadn't started to get better, I was about to go over at 3 a.m. and bang on DR's door and say, hey, brother, I need some backup here.
Right.
So, after that 20 minutes of intense prayer and feeling oppressed, spiritually, emotionally, physically, I was tired. And so I just thought, well, whatever that was is past. I'm going to go to sleep. I've only got 4 hours left until I need to be up and rolling for this Shabbat service. So I went to bed. I woke up the next morning. I felt fine. I felt just normal. And
Uh-huh.
we went off. We did the Shabbat service, and it was just wonderful. It was beautiful. It was eye opening. The speaker was really on point. It just was like he was speaking to me every lesson. This was PD, and I don't know, I don't want to butcher his last name, but it's like Vander Westhuizen. He's a Dutch origin, but he was from South Africa, and he was speaking a lot of truths that just were hitting me between the eyes. And so later that Sabbath, they had a break after some baptisms. And, when you go to a conference and you're going all day and you're listening to all kinds of amazing stuff, your brain gets tired. You're like, all right, I just need a
Yes.
little break. So Daryl and I
Totally.
we went back to the hotel to kind of change out our gear, maybe take a 10-minute, 15-minute power nap, and then go back to the congregation there and start this men's retreat. And this was about 5 or 5:30 in the afternoon on Saturday. I noticed when I came back to the hotel, I went over to turn on the air conditioner. There were several blood spots and stains on the curtains
Mm.
in front of the windows above the air conditioner. And this obviously struck me as strange. And, I used to be a police officer for a short while in Alaska. I did investigations. I know about blood splatter and evidence and collection and all this stuff. And I'm looking at this blood and it looks very fresh. It has a very crimson-y color to it. You know, uh, if it was an older stain, it would have been brownish,
Right.
dark brown. And and Zen, I can't prove it, but as I look back on that moment, I came into that room Friday night before I had this first episode, and I go right over to the air conditioner because I'm a big, sweaty guy. I first thing I do is I go into the room. They generally have that air conditioning turned off, and it's hot in that room.
Yeah.
And so I know I went over and cranked up that air, and there was no blood on those windows. Those curtains I would have noticed, but I noticed that blood Saturday afternoon, and I kind of got some chills. And I went over and grabbed Dr. and I said, "Man, check this out." And he was like, whoa, taking pictures, taking video. He's like, what is going on? And one of the stains looked like a giant handprint or a face.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was really creepy. And I'll have to text you the images. But there was like 6 or 7 spots of blood. There was even blood on the little curtain rods that hung down. But the handprint or the face, whatever that was the creepiest part. And I thought, man, I don't know
Yeah.
what's going on. I told Dr. I said, well, let's go back to your room and change. I'm going to pray. And I was just reflecting on the day. I was praying. And then all of a sudden, I started to feel that heavy presence again. And it felt like a pressure on my shoulders pushing down on me. And the hair on the back of my neck was up, and all of a sudden I started to have some more physical symptoms. I had an intense immediate asthma attack. It just like hit me out of nowhere. It was like a switch was flipped. And I thought, man, okay, there's something about this room. I got to get out of this room. So I grabbed up my stuff. I went next door and banged on Dr's door. He came to the door, and I must have freaked him out because he was like, bro, what's going on? Are you okay? I was wheezing heavily, and I'm like, can you hear me? He's like, yeah, what happened? I'm like, I don't know, man. So he saw the blood and then witnessed that second attack. And Zen, as soon as I left that room and I went into his room, the heaviness disappeared. And within a couple of 2, 3 minutes, my breathing was almost back to normal. And he says, Nate, we got to get you out of there. I said, yeah, definitely. He's like, you stay in my room tonight. We're checking you out. And he says to me, because he had paid for both the rooms, he says, "Give me your card key." He says, "What room are you in again?" And I had to think for a second, and then the light bulb came on, and I was like, "Whoa." I was in room 322,
Oh my goodness.
skull and
Wow.
bones.
Right. Yeah.
And we looked at each other, and it was like, it was like in the Scooby-Doo cartoons, when they realize something's bad, and Scooby looks at Velma or something, and they're like, "Whoa," it was like 322, like, this,
Right.
what is going on here? So we
Yeah,
went
no
down
doubt.
to the desk, and it was a very nice but clueless gal at the desk. And DR says, "Hey, what's the history on that room 322?" And she's like, "What?" And he's like, "You've had any weird experiences?" She's like, "No." And so we showed her pictures of the blood. And needless to say, I checked out of there.
Uh-huh.
And so, the next day we finished up the retreat. It was powerful. There was some prayer sessions that were eye-opening to me. And I just felt like, man, I know why I came here. Certainly for the speakers and what they shared, the spiritual messages. But I came to realize then that it wasn't a coincidence that the first Shabbat that I purpose to keep, I have two strong attacks within that first Shabbat.
Mhm.
And they were spiritual, but they also had a physical component. And I realized that there was a reason for me to be at this weekend event, and that Satan did not want me there. He was trying to scare me off. He was trying to get me sick so I would stay at the hotel or say, "Hey, Daryl, man, I got to go back to Toledo." But we pressed on. And the drive home, we just had a lot to talk about, as you could imagine. Um, and so I came to another conclusion, was that I've been doing all this seeking, but I really felt in my heart already convicted of the Sabbath, convicted of other commandments and of aspects of the feasts. And so I said, man, what am I waiting for? And then immediately I thought of those who would attack me viciously as soon as the information came out. But you know what? The second confirmation was I was well aware of that and prepared for it, but I didn't have any fear about it.
Yes.
And that's when I knew this is truth, and I need
Right.
to obey it. I need to follow
Yes.
it. I need to teach it. And so there were many confirmations on that weekend, and that was really the subject of my Sunday morning Take on the World talk.
Awesome.
It's my journey to the Father's truth, and so I just shared that testimony with the folks there, and it was wonderful. It was powerful.
That's great. When we return from this break, I want to go into kind of the details on that and what you and your wife studied and how you came to conviction, and also a little bit about, this men's gathering and the things that you heard and the things that just the kind of confirmation. And because I also myself, because I study all kinds of scripture, not just the Old Testament and Apocrypha, but I read all the extra biblical manuscripts and everything. And having done that, I also have come to the similar conclusion. And myself, I don't separate the Old or New Testament. And a lot of modern churches,
Mm,
they don't even print the Old Testament with the New Testament anymore.
yeah,
Not only is the Apocrypha removed, but now it's just from Matthew to Revelation,
yeah.
everything else has been thrown out. They don't.
If you're lucky, they'll give you a copy that has Psalms and Proverbs attached to it.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, and in my opinion, again, in wanting to know the fullness of the story, you have to start at the beginning,
Yes.
and go to the end. So otherwise, you're just watching the end of the movie, and you have no idea
Mm,
as to how things got set up and how things led to even, the fact that Christ fulfilled the Father's feast. I
yeah.
mean, most people don't even understand that. And it's so very important. Like when John said, "Behold the Lamb that takes away the sins of the world. Most mainstream Christians have no idea the context of what he's talking about there,
Yeah.
and it's so very important, so critical. And the fact that Christ did fulfill the Levitical feast days, in my mind, shows that the Old and the New Testament and he and the Father are one, that you can't separate, even though he said, and we are, yes, under new covenant, but still he did not come to destroy the law,
Yes.
but to fulfill it. And so these are some of the things that we'll talk about when we come back for second hour. But
Awesome.
yeah, and yeah, I'm really glad that you and your wife took the time. And see, this is another part of your journey, to awakening and having the time to do this and to not have to bow down to the expectations or to limit yourself to the beliefs of the church,
Yes.
and supporting and towing the line of that institution. Now you serve God, you hold His truth, you stand for His truth, no matter the judgment and the condemnation that others lay upon you. So,
Yeah, definitely.
and that's more important than anything. All right, we'll be right back, everyone. All right, welcome back, everybody, for second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Field here on Truth Frequency Radio. And I'm honored to have as guest with me this evening Pastor Nate Wolfe, who just released at the Take on the World conference his book, Fired for Truth. And we are speaking about his journey to awakening. We will go into some of the biblical cosmology stuff very shortly, but we are talking about his coming to discernment on the importance of honoring Sabbath, which, being the fourth commandment. I think it's definitely something that the Most High expects us to at least acknowledge, and to, and I believe that the reason why we were given a day of rest is to separate us from the mundane, from the carnal aspects of this world, from our regular roles in lives and careers and the jobs that we do to make money to support our families and to continue our existence here within the matrix, but that he wants us to at least on that one day, not just to have rest, and even though yes, that's important and balance is important, but I believe God wanted us to have chance and time to worship, to revere, to acknowledge, and to give focus to Him and to His Word and the study of His Word, because, in my opinion, it's in that manner that we develop more profound and deeper relationship with the Godhead, and that we come to know the truth of even why Yahushua had to come into mortal form in order to rectify the fall and to restore Adam, Eve, and humanity to our former estate and to what will be salvation through him. And so, and if you don't understand that, you're missing out on the whole reason for our being here in this world and at this time. And that, eternity through him is the most important focus for why we are here and who we are and what all of this is truly about, in my opinion. And so, um,
Amen.
yeah, so let me turn it back over to you, Pastor Nate. And if you would, tell us about your study with you and your wife, and then the discussions that you had, and why it was that you believe that, Sabbath and the feast days and things
Yeah.
of that nature, and anything else that you'd like to, mention why you believe now that those things are important, um, yeah, as far as our walks and our journeys
Yeah.
as Christians, because Christians being disciples unto Christ, followers of Christ, believers in the Savior Messiah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share about that. It's interesting, Zen, before I came to the whole understanding of the true biblical cosmology, there was a verse in a chapter of Acts, the book of Acts, that I came across one day and I was just examining some stuff and I decided to look into some of the original Greek language, and it was in reference to Acts chapter 20, verse 7, where it says, upon the first day of the week, this is in English in the King James, upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached unto them, ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight. And most of us know that's when the young man Eutychus fell out of sleep and fell out of the window there. Paul preaching to midnight. So there's quite a bit, to unpack in that chapter. But, I was preaching and part of a fellowship for, over 25 years that really, fixated on this verse, the first day of the week, being Sunday worship. And as I was looking, and I don't know what really caused me at the time, I believe it was the providence again of the Father. But at the time, I was just curious. And so I was looking into some of the Greek. And I noticed that the word there in that verse was Sabbaton. And you don't have to be a Greek expert, which I'm not, to recognize the word Sabbath in there, Sabbaton, Sabbath. And I thought, why does it have the word Sabbath in the Greek, but in the English it says upon the first day of the week? And of course, as you're aware, there's some commentary gymnastics that people will, they'll find in a lot of the commentaries explaining that. Well, it's what they call a Senite, or just a designation of which day from the Sabbath are we talking about during the week. But if you notice in the King James, the word day is in italics, which indicates to the reader, an aware reader, that word day is not in the original language. It was inserted right in the text to what, as they say, make the meaning more clear, right? But as you also are aware, inserting things into text can give you some trouble.
Right.
It can mislead. It can even purposefully deceive.
Yeah.
And so I struggled with that, Zen, and I'm like, well, okay, the commentators say this, and they're smarter than me, and they have more, degrees than a thermometer, and I'm just a local preacher. So I didn't know what to do with that. And so I kind of just was like, well, something doesn't add up, but I couldn't figure it out. And I was really just kind of on my own little island there on this point. And so I got a little frustrated, and I kind of just, decided, well, I don't know, forget it. I move on. So I continued, as a minister and doing my Sunday thing. And then, as I shared before the break, with my wife and I praying and studying about these things, we prayed to the Father. Are these things true? We've missed. We realize we missed some truth on other things. Is this potentially truth? And so, the scriptures that really jumped out to us on that, Zen, again, the first couple chapters of Genesis, obviously looking at flat earth, Genesis 1 was paramount, and I know we'll get to that. But regarding Sabbath, I was reading Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. Verse 3 of Genesis 2. And God, that's Elohim, blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. So he set it apart, he made it holy, or Kodesh, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. And I don't know why, but it was just like Genesis 1 with flat earth. All of a sudden it hit me. I'm like, wait a second. That has nothing to do with Jews, Jewish people, Israel. We all often will point to Exodus 20, obviously, because that was Mount Sinai, right? And that's the Ten Commandments. But I'm thinking, wait a second, this is relating to creation. I mean, this is the foundation of the foundation, right? And it just struck me. And I'm like, wow, he sanctified, he set that seventh day, apart, and and he set the example of it. He rested and he set it apart as holy.
Yeah.
And so then I've got Genesis 1 or 2, verses 1 through 3 in my face. Then I'm, of course, recalling Exodus chapter 20. And as you know, that commandment there, the fourth commandment, is the only one that says remember. And it covers more, several verses in that commandment, more than any of the other commandments by themselves. And then I thought, well, that's weird. What do I do with this? Because people kept saying, no, that's for the Jews. That's for the Jews. So then I find a few other scriptures. I'm reading in Isaiah chapter 66, and I'm sure you know what's coming here. But
Yeah.
I'm reading at the very end of the chapter. In Isaiah 66:22, for as the new heavens and the new earth which I
Right.
will make shall remain before me, saith the Lord, that's Yahuwah, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath, there's Shabbat, to another shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. Uh, it just hit me. I'm like, wait a second. So I've got a beginning scripture, the foundation of creation, saying that this seventh day is set apart as holy. Then, yes, you do have the Sinai, chapter 20, and the Ten Commandments. But then now I have a future reference. And
Right.
context has always been important to me. And you know that the context there is verse 22. For as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make. Okay. So this is future. And I'm sitting
Yes.
there and I'm going to myself, wait a second. We're not in the new heavens and the new earth. What are they doing keeping the Sabbath? So I came full circle back to Acts chapter 20 verse 7, and I came across by I don't believe it was a coincidence, but I came across one of Rob's shorter, it was like a 22 or 23-minute video where he addresses this Sabbaton in this verse. And then all of a sudden, what he was saying was making sense. And I'm thinking, wait a second, we've been on the same journey. What he saw was the same thing that I saw, only I didn't know what to do with it. And then, of course, in relation to the Sabbath, man wasn't made for Sabbath, but Sabbath was made for man. And isn't it interesting that it doesn't say Jews or Israel? It says man, right?
Right.
So I just continued to be blown away on this in this vein, and then of course you even have there's so many more scriptures, but another scripture relating to the commandments jumped out at me in Revelation chapter 14, verse 12. And it says, here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. And I'm just like, wow, okay, so they're keeping commandments and having faith in Messiah. And so those were some of the key scriptures. Some of these had even jumped out to me during the men's retreat. And not only that, but probably the clincher. Let me find it here real quick in my Bible. The clincher was probably First John chapter 2. And as I was reading this, someone was covering this at the men's retreat. And I know I've read First John many, many times then, and I was reading here in chapter 2 of First John, and it says in verse 3, hereby we do know that we know him if we keep his commandments. He that saith, I know him, and keepeth not his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoso keepeth his word, in him verily is the love of God perfected. Hereby we know that we are in him. And then verse 6 was like a Mike Tyson uppercut, okay? Verse 6, he that saith he abideth in him. That was me. I mean, I was abiding in him, and I was
Yes.
preaching and teaching to others to abide in him. Ought himself also so to walk, even as he walked. And for decades, How would I have answered that in a Bible class? I would have said, well, Jesus walked in love. He walked in compassion. End of story. We just need to be loving and compassionate. Well, that's true, right? I'm sure you'd agree with that. But there's a lot more to the story.
Right. Yes.
So I had to make a list. I made a list in my notes. I'm old school, handwritten notes at this men's retreat, and I'm like, how did Jesus walk? How did the Messiah walk? Yes, he walked in love. Yes, he walked in compassion, but he kept the Sabbath. He kept it holy, set apart. He kept the Father's commands, and he said basically the commandments that he gave, the words that he spoke, were simply the words that his Father had given him to speak. I mean, that was his ministry, was I'm here to do the Father's will. I'm here to
Yes.
speak the Father's words.
Right.
So
And
so
to
man,
fulfill his feast.
yeah. So I'm gonna take a breath and let you get a word in here, but you could see how excited I was about all of these scriptures.
Oh yeah, and also I believe it's in the Book of Jubilees and also in the Legends of the Jews. It speaks about how Sabbath is celebrated in heaven and
Mm,
that it was so even before the creation of humanity, that the angels also honor and celebrate Sabbath. So it's something that
wow.
God even has instituted in heaven and that the angels adhere to. And so, how much more for man that
Yeah,
we follow in, the paths and the institutions that he established for his holy angels.
yeah.
And so, yeah. And even
Well,
like Passover, just one other thing,
yeah.
things like Passover and the feast days, that Passover was celebrated all the way back even to Adam, that the first time he worshiped the Most High God was on Passover. That when Cain and Abel brought their offerings
Mm,
to God, it was also on Passover. When when Noah, left out of the ark and reestablished the altar, which happened to be the altar that Adam had created and that Noah fixed it after the flood, and this was also the same altar that Abraham had offered Isaac in sacrifice. That was also on Passover, and that it represented what God would do for us later in
yes,
allowing His Son to be the Passover lamb, which again, John said, "Behold the Lamb that takes away
yes.
the sins of the world." And so, all of these things, like when you read in the ancient manuscripts, and I've done shows on this and covered in great detail, that the feasts are also connected to, like, for instance, it was on the first of Tishri that Adam was removed from paradise. And then after the first Sabbath and his first Sabbath here that we had, that leads to the Day of Atonement. And I believe, in my opinion, that Yahushua was born on the first of Tishri, Yom Teruah, and it was because he came to fulfill and to save
Yes.
Adam and all of us. And, what better day for him to come into the world than on the exact day that Adam was removed, banished, and exiled to this earth and cast out of paradise? I mean,
Yeah.
and so all of these things, and there's a passage in the Legends of the Patriarchs and the Prophets that also refer to and confirm that the three remaining fall feasts that Yahushua will return on the Feast of Trumpets, and that it
Yes.
is on that day that the seventh trump will be sounded, that the church will be gathered and protected from the wrath of God that would be poured out on the wicked and those not written into the books of life, and then he'll take his judgment seat on the for Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, and then what John saw as far as the New Jerusalem descending out of the heavens, that it will be the harvest for the day of atonement and the judgment of who will be numbered and found worthy to be, numbered amongst the elect. That determination will then allow those that are worthy to enter into New Jerusalem for the millennial reign. And so all of these things are connected to the feast days. And so, but anyways, let me turn it back over to you, Pastor.
No, no, I'm grateful for that because I want to make it clear that Nate Wolfe does not believe that he has arrived at all truth, or now that he's keeping Sabbath and looked into the commandments that he has all the answers. I mean, I have always understood that the best teachers and the most reliable teachers are going to be diligent students, and so I see this, this journey to the Father's truth or to whole Bible belief, whatever you want to describe it as. It's really, it's a destination in a sense because it's a change, right? It's an answer to prayer and fervent study, but it's also another beginning. And, I'm going to be a diligent student till the day I die. I'm going to pray
Hmm.
fervently,
All of us,
you
brother.
know, exactly. And so
Hmm.
I want to make it real clear. I consider myself maybe just a deeper learner now. And there's so many things relating to the feast that have jumped out to us. And like you said, the likely day of Messiah's birth, not December 25th,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
and then of course everything connected, to the Feast of Trumpets and the things that you've described. And so it's brought a lot of freshness, and desire for study. And it was amazing. I mean, I still can't believe how much I was able to share of our year's journey at Take on the World 19 because they afforded me, three different stages to share those
Right.
testimonies. And that's the cool thing is for sure flat earth was a huge part of this last year for the Wolf family, not just for
Hmm.
Nate but for
Yes.
Jennifer and the kids. But I came to realize that it's not, as you said earlier, it's not just about flat earth. I mean, there are
Right.
many other truths that now I understand I have a responsibility towards. And then ministry, I I left a church. I was fired from a church of close to 200, and I know that I did good there. I know there was fruit. Every week there was a lot of fruit that came out of that. So I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater like some people would, but I recognize that my influence was relatively small. It was basically within those four walls, a few outreach things, throughout the year, but most of it was a fishbowl mentality. And my biggest responsibilities were to the members, right? And so once I was fired and people heard of my story and my testimony, and I basically was given various platforms to speak out on, now I've got literally tens of thousands of people who know about my situation and have seen, what has transpired over this last year.
Right.
As Chris Bailey says, yeah, you got fired for truth, but you were also hired for truth.
Right.
Uh, it's just a lot different than what you ever would have imagined. And so, I'm doing a lot of ministry almost daily. I mean, I have emails, I have Facebook Messenger conversations, I have, text messaging and phone calls. And I know there's going to come a time where I'm not going to be able to get to everything, all the time. But
Yes.
right now, I'm working hard to try to, engage with every person that reaches out to me, at least in a small way. And I've had the privilege of studying with people across the nation. I've traveled and baptized many people. And so I realize now that my influence and my potential ministry is so much more than it was before.
Yes.
And I didn't realize that when I got fired initially. I was kind of short-sighted in that. Um, but everything that's taken place this last year uh, has just been amazing. And it's not official yet, but I think it's safe to say there is a certain conference in the northwest corner of Arkansas that is attached to a verse in Isaiah chapter 46, verse 10. And they have invited me to their conference in the end of February to share about this journey to the Father's truth.
Awesome.
And perhaps a second speaking slot will be developed for me to share again at this conference. So I'll let them make the official announcement, but man, I just can't believe what the Father is doing. And as you understand, it is kind of scary when you have all of this ministry, but you don't necessarily have all the support that you need to provide various needs of your family. And so
Right.
things have been getting better. More people are supporting. Folks have purchased my book, and so things are picking up. And I really believe that if I stay focused on the kingdom, those other things will come.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if I shared this with you before, Zen, or maybe you've heard this on some of the things I've shared online or through the radio, but I went through a period of time months ago where for several months, I was applying for different jobs. And I applied for master's levels jobs. I applied for middle range jobs. I applied for even jobs that were really, and I don't mean this to sound prideful, but just they were way below what my experience in education was,
Right.
And I just couldn't buy a job. And I thought to myself, well, why can't I get a job? Like I need to provide for my family. The flesh was saying, hey, what about next month? Yeah, we got support this month, but what if it doesn't come in next month? And I came to a realization one day that I believed it was the Father that was blocking me from having these jobs.
Yes. Yes.
Because, yes, the job would have brought in more steady income, right? It would have given myself and my wife and my kids more peace of mind, more financial security, but it would have interrupted my ministry.
Absolutely. Hold on, brother. We'll
Right.
pick it up on the other side. We'll be right back, everyone. Welcome back, everybody, for final segment. Pastor Nate, I wanted to share this with you. I posted this in the chat room, and all the listeners, which there's quite a number. Thank you for what you are doing and for standing up for truth, and they appreciate all of what you have had to contend with. And what I said is that Pastor Nate Wolfe is joining me this evening to discuss his journey to awakening and how the Most High God has utilized him for greater purpose than he even expected for his ministry. And so with that, I want to turn it back over to you and give you a chance to finish what you were saying
Yeah.
and continue on, because
No, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you to everybody listening and those in the chat. Yeah, I was so excited about being on air with you. I forgot all about the chat, so my apologies. But I really wanted to make sure that I was very focused in sharing with you. And I don't multitask very well. A lot of times when I'm
yeah,
listening
it can be a
to
distraction.
Yeah, a lot of times when I'll tune in, to various shows on TFR, sometimes I will jump in the chat, but at that point I'm just a keyboard warrior, so I don't have to focus on, commercial breaks and trying to share. So thank you so much, for prefacing that, and for those in the chat, I really appreciate it, all of the support. But yeah, I never understood how broad of a scope this would be. And, I've had this question asked to me, Zen, many, many times, well, why don't you start a flat earth church? Why didn't you, you got fired, but why didn't you immediately start some truther congregation? And if that's the Father's will, you better believe Nate Wolfe will be starting some type of a congregation. But I just haven't felt that to this point, right? It's always been, and it still is in the back of my mind, a distinct possibility. I do pray about it occasionally. I know others have, engaged me on that topic. Uh, One of my Facebook friends, David, he was in the chat earlier, the premiere that Robbie and I had of our radio show with Mark Sargent. And he was bugging me in the chat saying, "Hey, Nate, when are you going to start a Flat Earth Church, man?" You know, and here's my response to that. That may happen. If it does, it'll be directed and instigated by the Father.
Yes.
Uh, you know, and I'll do everything in my power and ability to make that happen if that's His will. So pray for me in that, because I don't want to miss something important. But as you've stated already, I believe at least this first year since my firing, that not only did the Father raise me up to speak out on these truths and give me these wonderful opportunities through radio and social media and YouTube, even as challenging sometimes and as frustrating as YouTube is, uh, as you're well aware, it still is an avenue that I've been blessed to use. And
Yes.
I, with that, not just the speaking, but as I said, I really felt like He called me to be a minister, right, to those in the truth community. And so I've been so busy in between all of these other things, creating content, traveling, speaking, doing meetups, going to conferences. Uh, in between all of those things, I have done a lot of one-on-one ministry. I've had the opportunity to encourage people. I've been able to offer, counsel, spiritual counsel, occasionally. And I feel like if I had started a congregation right after I got fired, although that would be wonderful and there could be some fruit from that, I know how involved that would be. I know what it's like to help lead a congregation, and I know the time constraints with that and the responsibilities. And I also know that as soon as you start talking about having any kind of facility right outside of a home, you're starting to incur expense. And
Right.
one of the big things, and I'm not knocking churches, so please don't misunderstand me, folks, but one of the big things that always bothered me was that the major expense, next to whichever full-time ministry staff were being compensated for their work, the major expense of any church is typically the building and the continued use of those facilities, the
Right.
repairs, maintenance, replacing carpets, replacing pews, replacing sound systems, technology. Uh, and it really bothered me about that. And I thought, man, what a large percentage is going just for a building.
Exactly.
And I know good things happen in a building,
Right.
fellowship and
Right.
preaching of the word and celebrations. So I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying I haven't felt led to go out and get into debt to have a building. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Uh,
Exactly.
since I was fired, my family had started our home congregation. Initially, it was just our 6 family members. We needed a safe place to where we could worship in clear conscience without fear of somebody kicking us out of our home, or firing us.
Right.
And since the time that we've begun to keep Sabbath, we have traveled to different Shabbat, fellowships. Um, and it may be in the future that I end up deciding to do something specifically with a Shabbat fellowship. So, those things I believe are still being prayed about, explored. But honestly, I had someone offer me money. Okay. Within the first few weeks of when I got fired, I had somebody in Michigan said, "Hey, I can take an early retirement right now and I can get a lump sum of cash and I'll give you $15,000 to go start a church." And as tempting as that was, I thought it just didn't feel like it was spirit led, right? I'm
Uh-huh.
not saying his desire wasn't spirit filled. I'm just saying,
Right.
okay, why do I want to take this $15,000 and go start a congregation when I didn't have any leading from the Father on that?
Right.
Uh, and also, if it had been confirmed by several other sources, then perhaps I would have really taken a serious look at that. But at the time, it was this one man, who had a plan, and then there was hundreds of people bugging me on social media. But it really didn't feel like it was the Father saying, "Yes, Nate, you need to get moving on this. What are you waiting
Right.
for?"
Right.
So, so anyway, I'm still open to those things. And I also realized that this coming, year two since I was fired, uh, September 14th then will be uh, exactly 1 year to the day. So
Wow.
September 14th of 2018, the day I got fired was a Friday. This year it's a Saturday, but anyway, the 14th is a year, and so I realized that I may have some changes coming. I mean, the Father may adjust some things, or it may be along some similar lines, just on a broader spectrum, maybe a larger ability to reach out to people. I don't know, but I'm trying to stay humble. I'm trying to stay prayerfully open to that. And if having some type of a congregation, in the future is needed, uh, I'll follow that if that's where I feel He's taking me. But at this time, man, I've got so much ministry that I'm doing. Uh, I'm full time busy. I may not have a full time income yet, but
Yes.
I'm full
Right.
time busy. And
Exactly.
and back to what I shared with you about, why I didn't get these jobs. It wasn't for lack of trying. When I first came to the realization that maybe the Father is not allowing these doors to open for me, uh, I said, okay, well, I gotta put some kind of fleece or something out there, right? I need to make sure that I'm really on the right track. And so I said to myself, and I kind of said to the Father, well, I'm going to try to go out and just get any menial job. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go out and try to get a job that anybody could get. Go get an $8, $9 job. We're in America.
Uh-huh.
Uh, so I went out and for whatever reason, I chose two car dealerships, large car dealerships right in my town. And I went to one of them and I applied for a shuttle driver, taking folks back and forth from their homes if they dropped a car off or they needed to pick a car up. And I even had some connections at this dealership. And it was a no go. I mean, I even spoke with the manager in person. Someone referred me to the manager. My contact, my friend there, said, talk to the manager. I talked to the manager. He said, yeah, turn in your application, turn it into me personally. So when I filled that out, I came back to him personally and he says, all right, man, we'll have something soon for it. Never
Uh-huh.
got a call back. I went across the street to another car dealership and applied, for similar types of jobs, man, just anything you got. And oh yeah, our hiring manager's not in today, but fill this application out, and on Monday he'll give you a call. Guess what? No call came in. So I was frustrated, but at the same time, I thought, okay, you put this, you put this test out there to see if you would continue to get blocked, and I couldn't get a job that most other people could have gotten. And so that's not to say that in the future, the needs of my family might not require me to have a job, but I just felt like I didn't want to be fighting against the Father, right? I mean,
Right. Right.
he's the last person, he's the last, being that I want to be fighting against. And
Absolutely.
so we're really took a step of faith, after Take on the World, to say, all right, things are pretty tight, and there's no promises for the future here. We're just going to have to keep doing this, one day at a time and prayerfully. So that's where we're at right now, Zen.
Yeah, it again, brother, in my opinion, and this is the way that it was for me as well, that the Most High is going to put you and place you exactly where He wants you. And I believe that what you are seeing now, with even over the course of this year, is that you have had an opportunity to establish a ministry that is far larger than even most pastors and preachers that are church bound, brick and
Yes.
mortars,
Yes.
and that you have a testimony which has gone out into the world and that is being shared and is being noticed by many. And again, you are standing for truth in a way that most of them are not able to because of their affiliations, because
Yes.
of their uh, being locked down to congregations and to peoples and to boards and administrators.
Yes.
And that is liberating. And so,
Amen.
again, in my opinion, God is using you in a way that even right now, you, even though you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, he's preparing you for bigger things than, um, and even, I mean, with you being able to speak and to deliver those speeches at Take
Yeah.
on the World in the manner that you did, and for your family to see the impact that you are making on people's lives and bringing them to the truth in a way that, most of these pastors and preachers, they don't even understand truth. They're not even reading the entirety of the Bible. And
Yes.
here you have time to do your research and to be led in discernment, the Holy Spirit filling you and guiding you in so much truth. I mean, those guys are never even going to reach that level. They're
Yeah.
mostly taught by seminary and and believe in things, Sunday school and seminaries and things that aren't even connected to the real truth of the gospel and the
Mm.
revelations that the Most High is sharing with those of us that really are truth seekers, and that He is, standing up to be watchmen and watchwomen to the sheep in this time and this age. And so, yeah, I see, and I know greater things are on the horizon for you and family, and it's not yet about money.
Mm.
And that, there are always times of struggle, but that God has given us a chance. Even with me, it took me acquiring my disability for me to have the time and the space to be able to study
Mm.
and to seek out and to come to truth in the manner that I have. And so we are all brought to our knees first.
Yes.
Um, and so, in my opinion, that's the real journey. Because you look at the lives of the apostles and all the patriarchs and the prophets, and many of them were, like Job, they went through immense suffering in order to be refined like gold, purified
Yes.
for
Absolutely.
uh, for service to the Most High God. And so, yeah, I
Oh,
think
I thank you for that encouragement. I need that reminder because I'll be honest with you, man. As you know, you go to conferences and you have a chance to speak and share testimony, and you've got hundreds of people that are encouraging you, and some people just stop me in the middle of the hall and say, hey, can we pray for you? And you have all of that, and then after after the conference is over, you still have your encouragers, but I'm saying, like, there's this big, almost like this letdown, right? You're kind of like, oh. And when you're busy and you're active and you have ministry, it keeps you positive, it keeps you moving forward, it keeps your focus off of the bills that aren't paid and focused on the
right.
work that you need to be about. And I'll be honest with you, I had a couple of days earlier this week where it was just like, it was eerily silent, like there wasn't anything, and I was like, man, it was almost like, you're in a sailboat and the wind stops, and for 2 days you're just kind of
Right,
out there on the calm wondering,
right,
okay, what does this mean? Uh, there was really no ministry other than a few little text messages and planning for, the end of this week, such as this radio show. And for a couple of days, I was kind of getting a little bit discouraged. Like, man, I had all this encouragement and all this momentum. 2 days, haven't sold a book, haven't had any donations. Nobody's asked for my help. It's like, what does this mean? You start to feel negative. You start to feel discouraged. Like, oh man, maybe this thing isn't going to keep going. And and then today has just been a jam-packed day. I have spent, Zen, this by the end of your show, I will have spent 6 hours on in interviews and on the radio and on YouTube. in live stuff. So, I mean, I've had all kinds of wonderful interactions. I've been able to share testimony on a couple of different platforms. So today has just been a huge boost of encouragement. And I thank you for reminding me uh, about that, how blessed I am to be in
Right.
this situation and that I just need to keep trusting and the Father
Yes.
will take care of everything.
Exactly. Yes. And again, you are being groomed for greater purpose than we can yet understand right now.
Mm.
And so, um, yeah,
Hallelujah.
just trust, brother. And things are already working and falling into place and being, you know, being set up for you to be able to do the work that you are now. And
Yeah.
again, in greater capacity than most of those pastors and preachers and people that are, dedicated to buildings and having to spend all that time and effort in supporting buildings and,
Mm.
those that support them and keeping, because you're not under, the limitations of any of that.
Yes.
Now you can define and establish yourself in your ministry in a way and shape it according fully to your walk with the Most High God and
Yeah.
to His guidance and His direction for your will and that of your life and
Yeah.
that of
And
you and your family. And so,
yeah, the
that's
flexibility is amazing. I mean, if I need to travel to a different state tomorrow, I could do that.
yes,
As long
exactly
as I
right.
arrange things with the family, I'm not dropping the ball on family. But I can jump in my car and travel to a meetup. I can go and baptize somebody who says, "Hey, Nate, I want you to baptize me."
Right.
Uh, there is a lot of freedom in that, and I also want to thank you, for Sacred Word, picking me up as an author, and it's exciting, uh, to be, featured on your webpage there, and had my first book order come in just a few days ago through Sacred
Awesome.
Word Publishing. So that was
Great.
exciting. And that was an international order. And
Yes, praise
so
God.
it's amazing how many international orders have come in for this book. I have a good handful of them, certainly from the U.S. as well. But lately, several orders have come in from the UK and one even from the Netherlands. And
Wonderful.
this person has reached out and shared that they followed my story for a whole year, and I never knew that that person existed. So
Exactly.
yeah, I greatly appreciate the connection and the support that you guys have given me for months.
Well, we're honored to support you, brother. That's what we're all here to do, to encourage and empower one another. And so, yeah, that will only grow and it will continue. I mean, I've been an author for a very long time, and my books do sell all over the world, and that same thing will happen to you. So keep writing books and even put out DVDs, of your speeches at these
Yes,
different conferences, and you create inventory to share the message and
yes,
to bless others. And in that way, they will also bless you. And so it's a
amen.
win-win all the way around. And again, you're not being guided or limited by men or others, but only by God. We have
Yeah,
4 minutes remaining, brother, so I want to give you a chance for final commentary and
okay,
again, give out your website, contact information, the
sure.
radio broadcast, where people can go to find your books and support you, your Patreon, and all.
Sure. Thank you very much. So my website is firedfortruth.org. And on that website is some information, some links to videos and whatnot. But also, if someone wants to prayerfully consider becoming a monthly patron, there is a patron button on the top of my webpage, firedfortruth.org. They can just click on that button. It brings them right to the site. And they could sign up with whatever monthly donation for support they want to make. Also, at the bottom of the website is a donate now button that's linked through PayPal, so you can do a one-time donation or donations throughout the year if you choose to do so. There's also a contact form, which pushes to my nate@firedfortruth.org email. So there's a lot that you can access on the website there. My direct link for Patreon is www.patreon.com/Nate Wolfe. And my direct link for PayPal is www.paypal.me/Nate Wolfe. And if you prefer snail mail, email me at nate@firedfortruth.org, and I will get you my P.O. Box information. And, of course, as we mentioned, Robbie and I are on the radio, revolution.radio. That's every Saturday, 10 p.m. Eastern to midnight. And we pretty much have a guest almost every single week. So it's a full 2 hours, much like this show here. A lot of commentary, a lot of discussion, a lot of sharing about ministry, and, of course, about the gospel. So it's very exciting to be part of that as well.
And also, you can find Pastor Nate's book at www.sacredwordpublishing.com. And also, I'm sure you have it available at Fired for Truth. That's correct, right, Pastor Nate?
Well, I'm working on getting that on the website. Folks can just email me if they want to just work with me direct, nate@firedfortruth.org. I can get them the PayPal link. It is also, however, up on lulu.com, lulu.com, which you're very familiar with, Zen.
Yes.
I do have a page there, and people can go and order. They can choose their shipping, especially for international orders. That's a really good option. But again, very excited to be with Sacred Word as well, and look forward to, making all kinds of connections through Sacred Word Publishing.
Absolutely. I would encourage people to contact Pastor Nate and to request autograph copies. And I'm sure that, for donation over the price of the book, that Pastor Nate would be, welcome to personalize his books for people that want to give them as gifts or share them with others. And I think it would be a great resource to do so. We appreciate you, brother, so very much, and look forward to further discourse, further discussion with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zen, for having me on. It's exciting. It's great to be with you, and the support is just really appreciated.
Yeah, anytime, brother. And, that's what we're here to do. Again, we should be the example for each other in the way that Christ did, and being a foot washer into humanity, that, we are here to support one another. And I do absolutely believe that. So God bless you. Send our regards to the family.
Thank you. And please remember us in prayer. That's the most important thing.
Yes, absolutely. Likewise, us too, brother.
Will do.
All right. God bless all, and we will all pray for all of you as well. Be blessed in your seeking. Until next week. Shalom.